So the difficulties become your indication. It is already telling you what to do. But how many people get caught up in the opposite of it, and they find, no, but this is the proof of the impossibility. That doesn't come from the head, because the reason follows. The logic is very clear. That comes from the heart and fears. Fears of dunya. Fear of dunya is overcome with more fear. Fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the process. You see, so you start building upon the certainty. You see, what is not questionable is, because I do not have safekeeping, then I cannot have the shops, then I cannot have the coins, then riba cannot be that haram. Then therefore is, well, I mean, it's a thing of the past, therefore kufr is wonderful. Honestly. You end up from that, if you make your necessity to be the center of the world, then kufr starts covering everything up. Kufr means nothing but bailing. And then you think that you are thinking, but in fact you are not thinking at all. You are covering yourself up. And the only way that you can clear yourself from that mess is not a question of changing the way of thinking, or as if a calculator, you know, but changes the direction in which you think. The thinking process, the ability to calculate 2 + 2 is 2, is 4, and to make a logical statement. That is not the path to the truth. In as much as a calculator doesn't give you the truth of existence, you may nevertheless, with a calculator, look at the world and think that only that data that it can be entered into the calculator is the reality of the world. And that might be the beginning of all the mistakes. And that's where Heidegger comes in. You see, the calculator will only accept data that it can process. So you have to first reduce nature into something that the calculator can process. Then you are dealing with the data thinking that you are dealing with the reality. And that's how many of the patterns of thinking, of pseudo-thinking, is done today. Ours comes from a complete different angle. It comes from the certainty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the certainty of His commands, the certainty of His orders, and then we build on that certainty all the other living necessities on which we depend. So what is thinking then? Thinking is not an ability that resides purely in the brain, but thinking for us is connected to the heart, is guided. If the heart is in good shape, then you will have a good thinking. If the heart is in bad shape, then the thinking will be dangerous. If you're thinking with a bad heart, you will be, if you think better, you will be more dangerous. And therefore, you will be more, you have departed further from the reality and the guidance that you were seeking in the first place. We are living at a time of great darkness. The task before us, it seems to be immense. Riba has become the dominant logic of the people. It's taught in television, inadvertently, by the language that people use. It's taught in primary schools. It's taught in universities. And if you haven't passed through any of that, then the practice of every day is inspired by a logic which is based on Rahman. So we are completely surrounded by it. The idea that riba can be haram is a confrontation to the system. But at the same time, to see in it the problems will not be to understand the full extent of its reality. When we say something is haram, it's not like human legislation, like you cannot cross this street because it's only one direction. So there's a signal there telling you cannot go into this alley, or you find yourself into crossing a bridge and it says you cannot cross over here if your track is more than 3 meters. These are laws inspired by man regarding human functions. They can be changed, they can be altered once you change the necessities. But when it comes to the Shariah, Allah has made these borders. He says, bil haq. The world is created bil haq. The Sharia is embedded in the world. So when we say riba is haram, we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the creation of the world has made it haram. So it doesn't require us to legislate it. It doesn't matter whether we think it right or we don't think it at all. Riba is haram, independent of whether we understand it or not. If we do not understand it and we think it in however fashion we may do, and we declare it halal by means of Islamic banks or fantasies of the kind, it hasn't changed the Sharia. You can change the road, like you have changed the roads and the laws of the road, but not with the Sharia. Therefore, it means that the prohibition precedes us and it will carry on after us. Our participation in this understanding is not adding or subtracting to the truth. We do not interfere with it. We simply submit to it. But there is something more. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared riba haram, it means that everything in existence is an indication of this haram. So when riba appears in the world, not only us, but every atom of every thing in creation is already saying riba is haram. Everything in creation is against usury. Like the American poet Ezra Pound said, usura contra natura. Usura is against nature. And that's a very good way of expressing the basis of this idea, except we say riba is against Allah. Now this is so crazy that it's almost unthinkable in terms of how can this world sustain itself in this situation? How could usury have prevailed? There is only one force in the universe, and this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has declared war against riba. It doesn't mean that usury is another force against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no such thing. So what riba, when Allah declared war against the usurers, is not declared war against another force, but is saying that within the practice of riba there is its own destruction, that it will not prevail, that riba will perish, and that this practice will be eliminated, and that the people who practice will stop doing it. And that doesn't come off by its own force, so therefore it comes out of the lack of force. Usury is there because we are allowing it to be there. The responsibility of putting it right falls upon the Muslims. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I declare war on riba, He says, take notice that Allah and His Messenger has declared war on riba. But when He says His Messenger, it means us. We have an obligation upon that fight. And it means that thinking about riba is of the nature of realizing that everything in creation, absolutely everything, the good, the bad, the good practices, the good Muslims, the kuffar, the dinar and the dirham, as well as the dollar, they are all under the rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That they are all indicating that riba is haram. In other words, they in themselves, in each one of them, there is an indication to show that riba has to go. And if you go a little bit further, there will be indications in each one of those things. There will be indications to show that they are haram. And if we go a little bit further, if we think a little bit further, we will find in those things indications that they show us that they have to go.